Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to the talk. Oops, wait a second. I need to do the clicker. Yes, that's me on the right-hand side. I'm a climate reporter and also editor for Deutsche Welle. For those of you who don't know, it's the German public international broadcaster. And I lead the team for Planet A, which is a YouTube channel and also now a TikTok channel. So, I don't know how it is with your publications, but for our publications, our bosses are obsessed with getting younger audiences because they're really hard to get. As we've been talking about, a lot of young people do not want to listen to the news, especially climate news. There's a lot of climate news avoidance, and that is why we need to get to the platforms where the people already are. That's YouTube to a lesser extent. It's getting a bit older, but TikTok definitely. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction about Planet A. Who am I? Wait a second, I'm going to switch this. Who am I to talk about this? Who are we? So we're from DW. We launched in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. We're a team of about 20 people total for YouTube, and I'd say about 10 people loosely for TikTok. And we just reached 500,000 subscribers on the 3-year mark. This is our TikTok launch 2022 because we realized everybody's jumping on TikTok, rightly so. And we have to get on that train. And we're about at 77K subscribers. To give you an idea and to wake you up a little bit after the coma of the coffee break, here is a short trailer.
A bit of a pickle.
The world's worst traffic.
This village torn down for coal. Massive plastics problem.
How do we get out?
These leafy greens grow in symbiosis with fish.
You're seeing climate action in action.
Recycle the unrecyclable.
We look closer.
We took a dive into this fast fashion phenomenon.
We look through hundreds of company records, break it down.
This is water splitting up into hydrogen and oxygen.
Let's give it a try.
And voila, you can make electricity.
Subscribe and come along with us to find out how to get out of this mess.
Yeah, that's us. I just realized that we're using the same picture, I think, that also Joey used for the Earthrise one. It's an Imago one, but that is kind of what we're doing. And before we started the YouTube channel, we wanted to ask ourselves, what the hell are we doing? And why are we doing this? So we wanted to see basically how the climate coverage is doing on YouTube. And we realized that there was only one other journalistic outlet, which was PBS, in the English language, who was doing climate-focused reporting. All of the other outlets, whether it was CNN or Vox or Washington Post, they were doing overall coverage, but they didn't have a specific channel for climate change. So that's why we were like, oh, okay, that's a niche. People don't know us, DW, as much as other news outlets, but that is maybe where we can actually have an impact. Also, as many of you know, we Germans do like to talk about the climate a lot, so that's why we thought maybe that's one of our core competencies. Let's go into it. What was there on the YouTube space, and this is also what's happening to TikTok, is that there's a lot of user-friendly, user-close micro-content. What I mean with that is, for example, people who say, look at your own carbon footprint, or how you can have a zero plastic morning routine, and stuff like that, that is very micro, which is totally good, which we definitely need, but it kind of, for us as journalists, we thought that we also need to look at the bigger picture. Because what's happening a lot, as all of you know, is that corporations and governments are giving the individuals the responsibilities for climate change, while it is systemic. So what we want to do is we look at the big and the small, what we can do as consumers or also as individuals, and how the system needs to change. The other thing was and that's what we've been talking about also in the previous panel. How the hell do we get people to watch our content? What happens to me when I clock off is that I don't want to. I don't want to listen to climate content anymore. I don't want to read bad news. It's really bad for my mental health. So how do we get the people? We'll show you how to get out of this mess. I'll talk more about solutions, journalism, and how we handle it, and all of these things with concrete details later in the talk, mostly with TikTok examples, but that was our main initiative as well, to say, hey, let's look at solutions. Okay, if you're an individual creator or if you have a national publication, this may not apply to you. For us as Deutsche Welle, we're an international broadcaster. We could basically broadcast everywhere except for Germany. So we needed to know, who are we talking to? English-speaking audiences, for example, for YouTube, we said US, India, Indonesia, really big English-speaking populations. And also, we really wanted to make sure that we don't have the Eurocentric narrative. We heard about this before. We do this a lot, especially a lot of American outlets, I think, do their job really well, but they talk a lot about the US. And European outlets do that too. We do that too. How do we basically break out of that? And that also works in a way because we look, with a lot of stories, we look at how is that relevant to people outside of our bubble. Ages 14 to 29 for TikTok, 18 to 35 for YouTube, just so that you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about young people. So how the hell are we going to do this? There are 5 strategies that kind of crystallize themselves out after 3 years of doing this. Number 1, find your niche. So I think if you've been an individual creator before, you've had this all the time. Like, find something that you know about, that you want to do, that you want to focus on, and that only you can talk about, or that you can talk about especially well. Basically, find your unique selling point. For us, it was climate. It could be also something different, but we realized that there was a lot of need there for climate-specific explainers from people who really know, in a way, who do reporting on this topic most of the time. The second thing is SEO and trending topics. So SEO more so on the YouTube side, trending topics more on the TikTok side. I had a whole discussion with all the journalists about this, where they were like, oh, but why are we doing something that the numbers want? And basically, why are we doing something that's created by the algorithm? And why do we not just do stories that we think are important? Because stories that we think are important, who are we to judge? Of course, you need journalistic oversight, and you basically need to also set agendas of things that people may not find interesting in the beginning and then make them interesting. But for us, when we started the channel, we really, really looked at Google Trends. We really, really looked at YouTube search. We looked at what are the topics that people are asking for, what are the questions they're asking. And then we found out that there were not that many videos answering those questions. So we were like, okay, great, we can do that. Let's go in there and let's basically take that niche for us. Trending topics, because we have a really long production cycle of like 6 weeks, 2 months for a YouTube video, we can't really do that for YouTube, but we can definitely do it for TikTok, where if you have a news, if you work in news, you know this, but basically take that news, put it into a TikTok video in the first 3-4 hours, maybe 2 hours of doing that. And if you hit that nerve, you really can go viral. So much more than other platforms, I think, where it really takes a long time to establish yourself. On TikTok, if you're on those trending topics, if you're on those trending sounds, I think one of the first videos that we got more than 1 million views for was in the first 2 weeks or something, I think. So it can go really, really fast if you kind of jump on the wave at the right time. Number 3, this is really my favorite topic, meet the target audience. And I mean this in 2 ways. So for us, the target audience is also overseas. Geographically, of course, we need to talk also about stories that are not only in Europe or not only in the US, but also are reported on in other parts of the continent. What I also mean, though, and what I think is super, super important, is meet the target audience where they are. So on TikTok, on YouTube, and then also definitely start speaking their language. Basically, immerse yourself in where they are and then try to kind of sneakily bring them information and the news. I know it sounds a bit shady, but that's kind of what we try and do because of this news avoidance and because also compared to what social media platforms can bring our starting page, it's just laughable how many clicks they get. Broader topic framing, this is also kind of what we do by saying, for example, hey, let's talk about a topic, but let's not mention, for example, green or sustainable. If a reporter comes to me and says, and I basically tell them, pitch me a title, pitch me a thumbnail. And if they pitch me a title that says, can XYZ save the world, save the planet? Nothing can save the planet singularly. Or if somebody says, is XYZ actually sustainable? Is the green, whatever, green sustainable are words that I basically always delete out of the titles because it's too easy, and at the same time, it just frames the topic in an only climate change environment way that people who are not interested in climate change or not explicitly interested in climate change then don't care about. And that kind of scares people away, I feel like, because then they feel like it's only going to be about climate change. Oh, I've heard so much about it. I don't really want to engage in it anymore. But we kind of hide it. I'll give you examples about this afterwards. And then the fifth one is solution-based reporting, which I will get to in a later part. Okay, so find your niche. For us, we realize, and this is also what differs basically from traditional kind of, I think, way of doing media. Or TV, for example, you would have an entire series, you would plan it out, you would film it, and then you would broadcast it, and then you'd be like, okay, fine, now we did this. Whereas with us, it's a running operation, right? We have a video a week on YouTube, and we have 5 videos per week on TikTok. So you basically can then put out a lot. We have a host of topics in the beginning, and then we realized after like a year, what people really, really like is like nerdy technology, energy stuff. I would not have thought this. I think energy, although it's a very important topic, is one of the most boring topics really to report on. It's hard to make it exciting, you know? You're just like, oh, there's another 500th wind turbine. But for some reason, people love it. So we really went ham on this. We have an entire playlist of like 15 videos about the entire, maybe 20. Every single energy form that you've heard of, probably we've tackled. If not, please tell me, we'll do a video on it. Yeah, so that's kind of our niche, and we kind of figured it out while we're going through it, but basically building on what we knew would work. Then SEO trending topics. I talked about, I'll show you one example also on TikTok, but this was one story that I did where we knew on the 15th of April, we're going to exit nuclear power. Germany is going to exit nuclear power. And we knew that probably this was going to be our niche. And we timed it exactly to do this. And then we also realized, okay, the Google searches are going to go up in that time. And they did. And that's why we kind of placed it right in that time. It's hard to do with YouTube, obviously. But that's one example where it worked. And this is an example of meeting the target audience in a geographical way, and also flipping the narrative of like a very Eurocentric kind of way of thinking. How Bangladesh beat the world at fighting floods. This was after the flood in Central Europe in 2021. And then there was this whole discussion about how bad the response to the catastrophe was, and how all of the flood warning systems didn't work and all of that. And then we saw that right after that, a similar kind of, or even bigger event happened in Bangladesh, and they had much less deaths. And we were like, okay, how does this work? And that's why we basically went and looked at Bangladesh and looked at their solutions. And I think that's kind of also where we're going to, because as we've heard, a lot of the things that are happening right now imminently are happening in the global south. And looking and going there for solutions is just the thing that I think we should be doing more. Okay, so broader framing. I love this because, for example, here it says why the Himalayas have so many ghost villages. Thumbnail. By the way, we did a whole redesign of this. This is an old design. I'm sorry, we had to be in corporate design. It's not as nice as Earthrise Studios and others. But yeah, anyway, so why the Himalayas have so many ghost villages? I chose this title because there's a lot of also lost places videos on YouTube. People love like abandoned stuff. But actually it's about climate migration. It's about how the villagers in the Himalayas are moving down because they can't get enough agricultural land, or they can't basically get enough yield from the agricultural land. And that's why massive swaths in the Himalayas are being depopulated. Another thing is here about rice. The problem with rice, no one is talking about. No green, no sustainable, no, nothing about droughts or whatever else it is. This is about how much water rice is using. And basically we just teased that there is a problem, but we didn't really say what the problem was, and that it was actually about climate change. Worked here as well. Why Indonesia is building a whole new capital. This is about Nusantara, the new capital that they want to build, because one of the reasons why is because Jakarta is sinking because of climate change. But we basically all framed it on the whole idea of the capital, and then kind of in the middle of the video started talking about the reasons why this is even happening. And then we talked about the carbon footprint of the new city. But it's kind of also sneakily, in a way, incorporating it without being super blatant about it. Like we could have been like, oh, what's the carbon footprint of Nusantara? But we didn't want to do that. So if we go to solution-based reporting, this is what I really, really like to talk about as well, is that I think there are lots of frameworks, and there are people who have done much more work on this than I have, obviously. But what I do in my work as an editor is that I do an assessment first. Number one, which level are we at? Number one is awareness. Number two is solutions. Number three is questioning solutions. It sounds super easy. It is actually. But if a reporter comes to me with a story, for example, about, I don't know, plastic recycling or something, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, so where on this scala of the level are we? And then they'd be like, oh, we're at the solutions level. And then it would be something about, I don't know, maybe bioplastic or something. And then they'd be like, oh, there's this new thing that is about bioplastic. Actually, I did that piece. But anyway, if they had come, and then they would have said, so I want to talk about this exciting new thing. It's bioplastic, and it's really cool, and I want to look at it. Then I would say, well, I think we're not there. We're a bit further. We need to go and focus more on questioning the solution. Then, for example, we had a video where it was about bilge dumping. Has anybody heard about bilge dumping? Yeah, see, so we were like, okay, nobody knows about this. We're at awareness. Because sometimes also people come to me and say, hey, let's talk about how to solve bilge dumping, let's say. And then I'm like, we're not there yet. We're not at the solutions yet. We need to go to awareness. I feel like a lot of the time, with a lot of the problems that we have and a lot of the reporting that we're doing, we're still at the awareness stage. So we're at the time where we're sounding the alarm bells. We're saying this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. And that then obviously sends people into being anxious about it or avoiding it. And I feel like we need to definitely go more towards the solutions bit. But this is also, in a way, kind of dangerous, because if you only talk about the solutions, and if you basically then say, tack on at the end, oh, there's a problem, then you're also maybe not weighing it properly. So you also then have to go to questioning solutions. This always obviously depends on where you're at, where the topic's at. Plastic and stuff, we've talked about it a lot. Fossil fuels, we've talked about it a lot. We're way, way at stage 3. But basically knowing where we are at in this whole conversation is super important. I can give you an example of awareness, what we do on TikTok. About TikTok also, just going back to, and you will see it here as well, when we started the TikTok channel, and then we were interviewing reporters who wanted to come to our team, you really realized whether the people were on TikTok or not. I don't know, how many of you are on TikTok? What, as in what? Okay. Yeah, good. We're not all 16-year-olds, but there are a lot of people on TikTok. Yeah, I basically did not want to get on TikTok before I wanted to start the channel because I thought it was addictive. It's really good, as in capturing the attention of people, and it has really good quality content. And basically for us, and this is a daily struggle, for us is how do you kind of stick out of the sea of the information? How do you bring something that is more than just a very superficial overview of the topic? It's super hard. I think we're not there yet 100% to figure it all the time. You have hits and misses. But I think if you want to do vertical content, obviously there's also YouTube Shorts. Obviously there's also Instagram Reels. I know obviously Instagram Reels and TikTok is a bit of a different beast. I feel like on YouTube Shorts, it's kind of mixing of both, and it's just starting to grow. So I think that's a good place to be on and to go to. We've kind of had, I think in the recent 2 weeks or something, nobody really watched our shorts, and literally in the last 2 weeks, it's gone up like this. So I think there's something happening there. But yeah, that's why we also wanted to focus on vertical content, because the younger people obviously so much more focused on vertical content. And also get all of their news there. I mean, the amount of times that news has been broken to me by TikTok is embarrassing, but I think a lot of people who are also younger, that's their experience, that they get their news from there. There's so many comments where they say, oh, I didn't know about this. Oh, I found out through this TikTok. So I really do think it is a place to be, but you really need to know how to speak the language, which I think is really hard, but yeah, we can only try. So this is a video about where in the stage we are at of the solutions, awareness.
What the hell happened here, and here, and here? The answer lies buried right here. Permafrost is ground that's been frozen for at least 2 years in a row, but the ice is melting because climate change is pushing up temperatures, and that's a huge problem. The soil becomes unstable and can collapse. This is pretty much what happens to houses and roads. The soil also has lots of carbon in it because of all the dead animals and plants that found peace in the icy ground, like in a natural fridge. When the ice melts, they start rotting. This unleashes the carbon into the air and drives global warming even more. That brings more ugly sinkholes, and people wonder.
And then it loops. Yeah, that's basically a video that we did on permafrost. I think one of the first videos that reached a bigger audience. I think even for me who is used to TikTok, it's very fast-paced. There's a lot of information in there, but obviously that then makes people watch it again. And this is also kind of the fight that we had with our editors in the newsroom. It's basically, they don't understand. We show them this video and then they're like, it's too fast, I don't get it. What? And then what you then basically have to explain to them, which they don't like, is that you're not the target audience. We want to meet the target audience. You are not. I'm sorry, you're a 60-year-old German guy. Not who we want to reach. So that's kind of, basically then you need people who are just like, oh, okay, I trust you and I think you understand the platform, just, do it. And I also really, if there's any people who are thinking of starting a TikTok channel or going on YouTube Shorts or doing more Instagram Reels, to experiment, to basically put out content consistently over a longer time, then you'll see what works, and then you'll also see what doesn't work, and then you can build on stuff. For example, for us, I think we did like a workshop and brainstorming, and I think we came up with 4 series. Only one of them still exists. The other 3, we did a couple of times, it didn't work out, throw it out. And I think that kind of, if you put out that much content and also consistently, you also kind of have the leeway to then try things out, and then people don't see it anyway. If it didn't perform well, people won't see it anyway, unless they go into your page. But it kind of gives you a bit more creative freedom to do that. Number 2, This is solution-based reporting. Actually, also, what I think is important for vertical content or for shorter form content, if you have research beforehand, if you wrote a text about it, if you wrote an article about it, if you did a longer video on it, if you did a podcast episode on it, it's really good if you have done that deep research already and then basically make a TikTok video out of that. Because a lot of the people that are on TikTok do not have that depth of research because they don't have the time. If we didn't interconnect our research that we already have with the TikTok team, a lot of the TikToks then can become a bit surface level because they're also short, you don't have that much time to research. But if you already have that asset, use it and put it on TikTok in a TikTok-y way, which is hard to do, but if you do it right, it works. Oh, wait a second. No, can you play this video? Somebody?
Have you ever seen a wind turbine going into the water? It's actually called a tidal turbine, but it's almost identical. It takes power out of the tides as they ebb and flow. And while it's not as popular as other renewables, tidal power has some great advantages. It's predictable because tides will stay consistent as long as we have the sun and the moon. And it can be cheap. This French tidal plant actually produces cheaper energy than solar and nuclear. But not always, because salt in the water and sea creatures love to eat into metallic structures. So companies are trying workarounds from this kite that flows with currents to a floating system that makes maintenance easier. If we get it right, tidal power could power all homes in the US twice over.
Okay, so you can see also what is hard in a short form video to do is to provide all of the parts kind of what we want to have, let's say in a YouTube video, which is not only awareness, but also solution and questioning the solutions. What we then do is we focus per video basically on one aspect of it, either on the awareness or on the solution or on the questioning solution. The good thing about TikTok is, and I don't know whether this is the case in Instagram Reels, definitely not on YouTube Shorts yet, but if you have a question then, for example, here, where somebody said tidal energy would be a more efficient use, it was a different video. You can just make a video on that comment. So what we do is here, this is only basically pushing a solution, right? And then somebody was like, but what about, I forgot it, X, Y, Z, it doesn't work. And then we were just like, yeah, right. And then we did another video that is then linked in the comments about the limitations of it. So it also allows you kind of to not have to do everything in one video. But I think that's a really important aspect, that you don't have to push everything into one video, because I don't think a lot of people really, I didn't know about tidal energy before I started this. So I feel like you can then have different stages of solutions journalism in like a series of videos. Yeah, the other thing is questioning solutions. Obviously, this is a big part of solutions journalism. One of my favorite parts to do, because then you can kind of like jab at companies and stuff and governments. But here the thing is, what we did here for TikTok, for example, is that we used a trend. Anybody who's familiar with TikTok will realize that this is a bit of an older trend, but it's fine. Here we go. Yeah, super short, 7 seconds, I think, quite easy to do. Doesn't provide that much context, I know. But what we then also did here was basically we then put on I think we put on another comment and we answered, and we did a whole thing about carbon offsets by planting trees and how that's not good. And then we also linked to an entire YouTube video that we did. But yeah, so I think also as an editor about these 3 stages of solutions journalism, I always make sure that we don't veer towards one of these things entirely. So I'm just like, okay, the last 3 videos were maybe just showing solutions, right? So maybe we need to start doing another anti-greenwashing piece, or maybe we need to actually introduce people to a newer problem, although that's a bit depressing. But we kind of need to see that we are not, in a way, we don't weight one thing too much, and that we basically have a balanced reporting that we do. The other thing that I like, oops, here we go, is learning from analytics. This I really, really like, especially on YouTube, because in a way their analytics are fascinating. Not always do they say everything, but I think you can see patterns. For example, this is, sorry that it's in German, I couldn't change it. But anyway, what it says is the gray area, that's the retention curve. Basically, 100% in the very beginning to the very left. Wait, there's a laser pointer. Here we go. Here at the very left, you can't really see it, but that's where people start watching, and then it drops off dramatically. This always happens. I think it's called the hockey stick curve or something because of that. So, and basically what you need to do is you need to keep this line level. You basically need to keep the people from leaving your video. And in this blue area that you can see here, that is where people stayed longer than they would usually. And then you can go in and you can have a look at which parts of it is where they stayed. What we realized, this is, I think it was about floating wind turbines, and we did like an experiment with an aquarium that we've used for like every second piece, just because we realized people love it. If you basically do hands-on experiments, all of that stuff, I love watching it. It makes it more interesting. It makes it more engaging. And we see this time and time again, that when we do this, people stay longer. So that's also kind of, while we are doing it, figuring it out and changing the way we do stories and the way we do our storytelling. Next. Yeah, this is also what we like to do. This is kind of also the blue area here. In general, this is graphics. This is a timeline, I think, of protests. All of this time, every time we put in a timeline, people love the history bits. I love the history bits too. But as soon as we also put in like any kind of graphic that is not confusing, hopefully, and people basically just want to, at least stick it out until they've understood the graphic. And then they can maybe go, but as long as it's there, that's how you keep the people. And that is also what YouTube really likes. YouTube really likes to look at the retention, what % of people are going to stay until a certain time. And the longer you keep the people, the better. So that's why we've also started putting a lot of these, not necessarily just because we want timelines, but because it's better to put them in there. If we can, we put a history part in there. And that's how we learn from it. Yeah, so another thing is also that we've realized for our TikTok, for example, I don't have the picture here, but we used Google Earth satellite imagery. I think that's the other talk that's going on. And we did a whole series basically that was called Zooming In. And we realized there that we use Google Earth imagery, how basically the climate has changed, or also how there's soil degradation or regreening the deserts and all of these things. And we realized, oh, this video works. Oh, then we'll do another one. Then we'll do another one. And it really built up. And you could really see kind of from, especially in the beginning, all of the videos that we had, the ones that were doing well were the Google Earth ones because they were recognizable. Yeah, same thing also went for TikTok when we were talking about the Willow Project. The US audiences loved the Willow Project, which was also kind of eye-opening because, well, they didn't love the Willow Project, obviously. But they basically said, there we saw a lot of comments saying, oh my God, the Earth is doomed. Oh, I'm scared. I'm having anxiety. My anxiety is skyrocketing. It was very worrying, actually, because I think at some point it got like 5 million views, and we couldn't keep up with the comments. And our community manager basically said, oh my God, I don't know what we did. Because we put out this news. A lot of people saw it for the first time on the TikTok, as they said, and they got really, really anxious. So there is a huge danger in only doing these kind of, standalone content. But what we then did was we took it, and the very next day after that, we took a comment that said, I'm super, super anxious, we're doomed. And then we took that, and then we basically put it into context. So you can use that as well to not only have a one-off thing, but also provide context later. But yeah, that was very scary. I don't know how it was on other social platforms, but that's when we really realized that, yeah, this kind of reporting can have a lot of impact on people's anxieties, on people's mental health, and we have a responsibility to follow up with that. Not to basically say, no, don't worry, we were just exaggerating, we weren't, but to basically put it into context and explain a bit more what we were doing. Yeah, so I think that was all I wanted to say. Yeah, that's my last slide. Thank you very much.